Hi, ciao. This is Giuseppe Camuncoli, aka Camo from Italy, and you're listening to the Amazing Spider Talk.
Hello, and welcome to the Amazing Spider Talk. I am your co-host, Mark Ginocchio from the Chasing Amazing blog. And if you're confused by the fact that I am opening the show and not our other fearless co-host, Dan Gvozden, it's because I am flying solo today for a very special episode of Amazing Spider Talk and our amazing friends. In this episode, I will be speaking to Spider-Man artist Giuseppe Camuncoli, or Camo. I was fortunate enough to have met Camo at New York Comic Con in early October, and after a little bit of back and forth, we finally figured out a time to talk. He was actually on the road at a comic event in Argentina. Camo is originally from Italy and still lives there. So we dealt with some time zone differences, some other logistical challenges, but we're here, and it's a great interview, and we talk about Camo's origins and getting into the industry and his first Spider-Man stories, and, of course, his current work with Superior Spider-Man and Spider-Verse. So get yourselves ready and check in and listen to this great interview with Giuseppe Camuncoli.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends, Iceman and Firestar.
Hey, this is Mark Ginocchio with the Amazing Spider Talk, and we got a very special guest today. We have Giuseppe Camuncoli, who was gracious enough to let us talk to him on the road. I know he's traveling. I believe you're in Argentina right now, right, Giuseppe?
Yeah, right. I'm here in Buenos Aires, and I will be heading back home tomorrow, actually.
Excellent. Well, for those of you who don't know, Giuseppe, of course, has been an artist on various Spider-Man series for quite a while now. I know he's really started as part of the regular rotation with Amazing Spider-Man with Dan Slott in 2011, and then became part of the Superior Spider-Man rotation, and he's done a couple of issues of the rebooted Amazing Spider-Man, and is going to be part of the Great Spider-Verse series that we're in the midst of. So again, Giuseppe, thank you so much for taking your time out.
You're more than welcome, Mark. Thank you for calling me. It's a pleasure.
My pleasure too. I did want to ask you. I mean, now Giuseppe, you grew up overseas, right, in Italy?
Yeah. I still live in Italy. Grew up and lived in Italy for all my life.
So how did you become interested in comic books living overseas, and like what were some of the first superhero books that you read? I mean, did you read the Marvel and DC characters that we're all familiar with here in the States, or did you have your own multiverse hero, so to speak?
No, I grew up reading mostly Marvel comics because I was born in '75, and like around the time when I was about able to read, I was already familiar with comics because my father used to collect an Italian comic book, a Western comic called Tex, which is pretty popular over here in Italy. And I was already familiar with that, but it's black and white comics, really good one, like long tradition. But and then I discovered superheroes, and in the early '80s in Italy, we only had like the end of the golden age of comics of this publisher called Editoriale Cono, who was the first one in the '70s to introduce the Marvel universe in Italy. And the publishing house went down, and so like we only got a glimpse of like the last remnants of the publishing course of the publishing house. But and we had no DC at the time. We had it earlier, and we got it afterwards, and we still have it now. But when I was a kid, it was mostly Marvel comics. And of course, I would go to the library because I was interested in comics, so I could read any comic, European, French, Italian, American, mostly superheroes. But then I found out about DC Comics because they had books in my library in my hometown. And I was not a very voracious reader. Wouldn't give up. Like I would read all of them. So it's but again, like the most comics that I could find for superheroes were Marvel comics. So I grew up reading mostly Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, all of them basically. And I have no, complete collections because like every week my family allowed me to buy a comic per week. So I could choose, but every comic there was like a comic that I would love, and so there's no complete collections that I have because like a week was Spider-Man and the other week was Fantastic Four and then it was Thor and then it was Iron Man, then Daredevil. So that kind of thing.
Growing up, I would go. There was a corner store across the street from the church that I would go to with my father, and he would give me every week $1, and after I guess the comic was my prize for sitting through church for an hour, and it was let's go to the candy store. He'd pick up a newspaper, and I would get whatever comic I can get for $1 off the spinner rack, and if there was a special edition comic that was more than $1, I'd have to see if he'd throw me the extra 50 cents or something to make up for it. So who were some of your artistic influences? When you were kind of honing your craft.
Well, when I was a kid, I told like I basically read everything, and also watched a lot of cartoons, like Japanese cartoons. So like I guess that it's a little bit of everything. Like from Hugo Pratt to Mabius, talking about comic creators from Europe, and then later on like Japanese artists too. But like when I was a kid, like I was mostly into the classics, like Jack Kirby, Steve Ditko, John Romita Jr., John Romita Sr., Gene Colan, who was like great. I was a great fan, big fan of Gene Colan, George Tasca, but then again, wave after wave, when they started, publishing again comics in Italy, then I found out about John Byrne, and I loved it. Mike Golden, Barry Windsor Smith, all of them, and then, but probably the biggest influences I had, like when I was a kid, and wasn't really. I've always been drawing, but at the time I wasn't really following any course or career about comic. It was just like drawing. But I think that Frank Miller and Jim Lee were my biggest influences. Well, were probably the two artists that mostly shaped my style. What is now my style. Frank Miller, when I found out about Dark Knight Returns, like that completely revolutionized the way I was looking at comics. And of course, there were Watchmen and V for Vendetta, and it was like about that time when I found out about those comics. It was the early '90s, I think, in Italy. Got it a little bit later than you, but Dark Knight, there was no way back from there. Like that nasty, depiction of Bruce Wayne, an old, grim and gritty, right? But there was a force, a power in those drawings that I kind of paired that with Hugo Pratt and Jim Lee's, another force of nature, like the details and the anatomy and the action and everything. So it's a blend, and like. Yeah, I keep on evolving. Like my style is always like evolving. I'm now I've been working for the American market since the end of 2000, and it's quite a few years. But I still feel like I'm constantly changing. Like I see a new artist that I like, and maybe something inadvertently influences what I do. But yeah, I would say that those guys were probably, well, all of them, but probably those two guys were the ones that influenced me the most.
So, I was going to ask you this a little later in the conversation, but I'll jump right to it. You mentioned Frank Miller, and of course, a lot of your Spider-Man, Amazing Spider-Man work was inked by Klaus Janson, who of course worked with Frank. And so, what was that like for you? I mean, that kind of had to be like, that had to be crazy for you, right? To be inked by Klaus.
It was a dream come true. Like it was like probably a couple of years that I had tried to get Klaus ink something of mine, like even a cover or anything, because I'm a big fan of his work, both as an artist, as an inker. And And when Steve Wecker, at the time the editor of Spider-Man, offered me to jump on Spider-Man, I was a little unsure about it because I had done so many sketches of Spider-Man at shows that I was like afraid that I was fed up with the character, like too many webs, too many details to draw, and too many skyscrapers. But I asked him if I could get Carlos Jensen to ink my pages, and he made it happen. And that made me, first of all, very confident that if I would screw up anything, he would be able to, fix it, because he's a master. And and secondly, like I'm very happy to get the chance to work with Klaus, and that's when I got that email when Steve told me that Klaus was interested and was doing it. He forced me to to recognize that he was my favorite editor ever, and it was true because like he made it happen. I'm very grateful for that, and then I met Klaus, and it's magical. This is one of those things that, and actually there's many other things about like that, but that makes our job like so magical, because like I guess that every one of us grew up as a reader, and if we have the chance of becoming creators, professional creators, that there's always like something, like even meeting someone that would fulfill, something they would never dreamed of when you were a kid, and working with Klaus has been one of those highlights that I, definitely has a special place in my heart.
Yeah, no, I mean that. Like the second you said Frank Miller, I was like, oh, you must have just been beyond, just so excited about that. I mean, and Klaus is obviously such an icon, and really defined a lot of what Frank Miller's artwork looked like. Just to jump time a little bit. Now, I believe the first Spider-Man story that you illustrated was a Tangled Web issue with Brian Azzarello. Is that sound about right?
And it's called, yeah, correct.
A Tangled Web issue, and if memory serves, in that issue was kind of a spotlight on Crusher Hogan, the wrestler who so I mean, and that was kind of, that story kind of served as a prequel to, obviously Amazing Fantasy 15. So for that to be your first Spider-Man story, to kind of do a story that spun off obviously one of the most famous comic book stories of all time. I mean, what was that like for you? I mean, was that just kind of, how did that come about? Were you just kind of asked to jump on on the story? I mean, was this, just explain that to me, because that had to be pretty cool to have that be your first story.
Yeah, it was my first work at Marvel, actually. Axel Alonso was the editor of the book at the time, and he contacted me because I had just done my first 2 issues of Hellblazer with Brian Azzarello for Vertigo, and he liked those. And so Brian had a story for Tangled Web, and so like Axel called me to ask me if I was interested in doing it, and of course I was interested because like I started over at DC, but then again like this was another dream come true, like doing something for Marvel. So even if it was just 1 issue, I would have done something for Marvel, and it's a great story. I think it's one of the most intense and emotional stories I've worked with. And with Brian, like every time we talk about it, we still talk about that like one of our favorite stories. But and of course, like looking back at the drawings now, they don't look so good to me. But yeah, it's like more than 10 years ago. But it was an honor to be part of that story because it's a great story. Like it's like a whole new point of view on Crusher Hogan, like he's always been seen like the villain, like like the bad guy, but that story completely revolutionizes the way you look at him, and I think it's what Brian is genius. So I think he really updated himself with that story. So that's another thing that has a special place in my heart too, and it was fun though because Spider-Man doesn't appear but in the last page and with no costume. So, like everyone was, making fun of me because like, yeah, of course you're drawing Spider-Man, but then you didn't in the end. And of course I didn't. But, after that book, like I was invited by so many shows over the world. And I remember that everybody was asking me Spider-Man. And that's why, like I got kind of like fed up with drawing Spider-Man, because like so many ways I was like, man, like, is it possible to do that on a regular monthly book? And of course it is. Like, and actually, in 2011 when I started actually working on the Amazing Spider-Man title with Dan. I would have never thought that I would still be here now after 3 years and a half, and still having fun and having lots of fun with it. Like I probably say, well, of course, I'm gonna take the chance and work on Spider-Man, but maybe I don't know, it's gonna last. Maybe they're just gonna have me on the book for a couple of issues or more. But no. Actually, on the other hand, it's been a fantastic ride, and I hope it doesn't stop because I'm having fun and I love what Dan does. So like, this is definitely a thrilling ride for me.
You're talking about revolutionary stories. The whole superior concept was just so unique and different and controversial to some degree too. So when you found out that you were going to be on the rotation for that book with Humberto Ramos and Ryan Stegman, I mean, first of all, what did that mean to you to be on the rotation? But also, what did you think of the superior concept when the whole thing was pitched to you?
It's funny. I actually got no clue that was happening until I got that email, talking about what was going to happen. And I thought, well, this is crazy. But of course, like I would trust my editor and I trust Dan because like I really love what he does. And I told you immediately since the very first script that working on those stories made me remember, or like reminded me of the Golden Age stories that I read, like the Lee Ditko, the Lee Romita, the Golden Age of comics when I got so into it. And so like I had total faith in the man. Like as crazy as it might sound at the time, I thought, well, I want to give it a try. And it was already interesting to me, the fact that it would be like a darker Spider-Man, because I'm usually more into dark characters, like Dark Knight and Wolverine and Batman and everything. But I thought that the chance of playing with Peter and the fact that it would be a little bit more extreme, a little bit more, free to do whatever he wanted to do, totally, basically. That made me think that there were chances of like that becoming something very interesting and very different from what had been done before, and it was like that. And I'm happy, I'm like totally like since the very beginning of Superior, like we've been to shows and like there's so many people that came to us. Like I've been to a show with Dan and other fans and everything, but that came to us and told us that they began reading comics with that book. And that's always like a positive sign to me. Like even like a single new reader that jumps in for the industry, if it's your doing, I think it's a blessing because it might end up like reading comics forever. I mean, that's what happened to me. And it was a fun ride. It was great. It was actually very interesting. Like I would never even dreamed of like working on the final chapter on Goblin Nation. I didn't even know how many issues would that last. And that's also one of the closest things that is to read comics to me nowadays, because like I've been working so much that it's really hard to enjoy comics. So not knowing exactly what goes on the next issues is kind of like a guilty pleasure to me. So it was good to be along on the ride, and it's good that it was always been like a book that had great critiques and great reviews and sold really well. So it's a run that I'm very proud of.
I have to ask you with Goblin Nation. I mean, what was it like to find out you were doing a Green Goblin story? Because that's got to be like if you are even somewhat a fan of Spider-Man. I mean, to be doing a Green Goblin story has got to be the best thing ever, right?
Yeah. It's like totally unexpected, and on the other hand, like so cool. And Green Goblin, one of my favorite villains. But so the thing is that you do Goblin Nation, and then you think, well, what else can that be? And then you get like Spider-Verse, So that's the thing with Dan and Nick Lowe, the editor, and then the whole Marvel team on Spider-Man. It's that. And Spider-Man also has like a cast of villains that's one of the best, together with Batman, I think. And so like the Green Goblin has always been like one of my favorite villains. But then there are so many, and you can do so many cool things with the right story, with that cast that it felt great. But at the same time, I was like, give me some more. Like I can't wait to hear what's up next. And then we got Spider-Verse, which is something totally epic, which I'm working on. That's one of the most epic things ever. So super cool and super happy with it.
Yeah, I mean, how much research have you had to do for Spider Verse with all these alternative Spider Men from different countries and universes and all of this? I mean, is that's got to be tough. I mean, especially those two superior prologue issues you did, where I mean, there was like 10 different guys on some pages, from all over. So,
Well,
what kind of
that was nothing compared. That was nothing compared to what I'm doing now. Yeah. No, I mean it's not as much as the research because the office is like sending references and everything. It's about trying to to be loyal to every single one of them because they're all different. And sometimes there's so many on the page that not only you have to try to make them look unique, because Spider-Ham is different than Spider-Man India and everything, not only because of the way they look, but also because of the way, they act and talk and the body moves and everything. But yeah, the most difficult thing is like being, paying attention to details, and trying to make everything work on the page. But, it's kind of like terrifying when you have to start a page, but once the page is done, it's beautiful. So it rewards you of the artwork basically.
what's it like process-wise working with someone like Dan Slott? Because I talked to Humberto Ramos a while ago, and he kind of talked how Dan, he just has these huge ideas, and which could make for these very complex images in the comic. Lots of action, lots of characters. Obviously, you're experiencing that with Spider-Verse. So, I mean, what's the process like with Dan? I mean, how much back and forth is there? Does he just deliver you the script and tell you to do what you can, or how does he plot it for you? I'm just curious what Dan's process is with his artists.
Yeah, well, first of all, Dance is unstoppable. He keeps on having ideas, and like if you talk to him, like it really keeps on like flowing, like ideas, like very good ideas, one after the other. It's unbelievable. It's unbelievable. And but no, he is one of the few writers, from what I know, from what I've been told, that works the Stanley way. Like so not from a full script, but usually sends the plot, which is already divided in pages and panels most of the times, and then he has the dialogues later after seeing the page. So depending on the scene in the book, or depending on the time, like you could have like a very detailed script anyway, only the dialogue is missing, or you could have like especially for the action scenes, something which is looser, and then it's basically up to me, because like yes, he and the editor have confidence in me to be able to make it. And well, and it's not so difficult. I mean, there's not so much back and forth. Just like basically getting the script done, like turning pages in, and if there's anything to change, like I'll change it. But most of the times, like luckily enough, I nail everything down. So it's pretty easy. In the very beginning, it was a little bit slower as a process because like I wanted to turn in layouts first, so that they would you know pay attention to the fact, like make sure that I would leave enough space for dialogues and everything. But now in the end, like I'm just like skipping the process now and mostly turning in like pencils directly. And if I have to redo something, I redo it. But it's been like 3 years and a half now that I'm working with Dan, and so I think that we're in that phase in which there's a good chemistry between us, and so like it's very hard to do things that are not like good, in one direction or the other. At least that's what I think.
How has working with Dan allowed you to kind of evolve as an artist? Because I mean, I think I mentioned this earlier. Within like kind of the Spider-Man fan community, I know a lot of people really started taking notice of you during Goblin Nation. I mean, there was just a lot of really cool layouts and designs throughout those issues, and it just, I mean, from someone who's been following you for a while, it just seemed like there was an evolution. And I mean, was that just something that just comes naturally with time, or do you think kind of having these big stories to work with Dan has kind of pushed you a little bit harder? I mean, what do you owe up to that?
Well, probably all of it. It's really hard to say from my point of view. If there's an evolution or not. Well, maybe you can see it afterwards, but not while you're doing it. I was totally aware of the fact that it was like an epic story, and epic and action and grim and gritty, and those are the things that made me excited. I'm usually trying to to do my best with every page and every story, but it's maybe something that kicks in and without noticing. It's not like a very conscious process, like evolving. Otherwise, you would do it sooner, I think. But no, I was noticing the same thing, like reading reviews and everything. And I'm looking back at the pages. Yeah, I think there's been an evolution. And I really can't say what happened. But I think it has something to do with the fact that the scope of the story was pretty big and epic. And especially, not only the big action scenes, but also like the most intense moment, like when Otto gives up, and Peter is back, those kinds of moments, together with all the build up and the city in flames and the goblins and everything, it all, merged together to become something, probably, unique. But yeah, I can hardly, remember like paying attention to that. I was just like trying to, meet my deadlines and do a kick-ass job as much as possible. And as always, so there was nothing different from my usual approach. It was maybe something natural that kicked in, without me realizing it. That's, at least that's what I think.
Hey, no, it's whatever works because it's been awesome and it's continued to be awesome. One of the things that we've noticed, just in terms of how you lay out the pages, and we don't see this a lot in comics, is you like to use like a lot of like vertical slices and how you break up the panels. I mean, do you get that idea from anywhere, or is this just something you thought you'd try and you've kind of run with?
Well, I've been doing those since the very beginning. I started out professionally in Italy in '97 with a self-published book called Bone Rest that was later on translated in America by Image. But I think I got that from Chris Bacalo. We say Bacalo in Italy, but Chris Baccello. I have always been a big fan of his work since the Vertigo days, and I think he was the first one, if I remember well, that I saw like doing that kind of layout. And I always thought it was like very cool and very different. And of course, it's not a layout that you can apply to every page. But usually, when I read a script and I see that there's a right amount of panels, usually it has to be 3 to 5. Nothing more than that. Sometimes you can do it, but and if it works, like there's something that clicks, and I'm trying to visualize like panels, in that kind of layout and grid. And if it works, I usually do it. I try not to over abuse it, of course, because it's not something that you can do in every issue or so often. But if it works, I think it gives like the page something pretty different from the others. So, but yeah, I'm pretty sure I got that from Chris Pacello. So it's nothing new.
Well, it's still pretty unique. It's not used a lot, even if you got it from somewhere else. So do you have like a kind of a set group of Spider-Man characters that you just really love, or the opposite, don't like drawing? It's funny, we talked to Mark Bagley a while ago, and this is the guy who created Carnage, and when we asked him this question, he said, I hate drawing Carnage. He's impossible to draw, and it's too much red. So I'm just curious, is there anyone that you love or don't love illustrating that you've done or wish to do?
It's funny, like I think I drew my first Carnage sketch here in Argentina, like this past weekend, and it was cool actually. Well, maybe it's because it was only one. I don't know. No, there's nothing that particularly stands out in something that I like or don't like in terms of like the cast. But yeah, I definitely have some favorites. Like Venom is always cool to draw, and J. Jonah Jameson is another favorite of mine. Mary Jane, and the Vulture, Hammerhead. There's so many. Like I said before, so many cool characters. Even like both visually and like story wise, that there's. It always feels like a blessing, as a fan, to be able to draw even a single panel with that, So for sure, there's no character that I hate drawing, and actually, the cool thing would be being able in the future to draw as many as possible. I can't, I can't remember if I drew. I'm pretty sure that I didn't draw even but a glimpse of the whole cast. But it would be cool to get to draw a lot, of the Spider-Man cast.
Yeah, I mean, and one thing we've noticed is when you draw women, you have like you really do a good job of like bringing out a variety of different, body types and features and whatnot when you draw women. I mean, is this a conscious thing that you do to kind of distinguish all the women from each other? I mean, because this is obviously something that a lot of people are paying increasingly attention to in the industry. So I'm just curious what your process is with that.
Again, there's nothing so difficult. It's not something that yeah. It's something. It's probably something that I do very very easily and very naturally. So thank you for saying that. I mean, I'm happy to to learn that. But it's I try to pay attention to details, and that's it. But yeah, it's I try to women are maybe more difficult to draw than men, because they usually male artists have a hard time drawing women and the other way around. But after a while, I think it's you pay just a little more extra time in that, and it's fine.
Cool. Well, Giuseppe, we're gonna wrap with a final question here that we like to ask creators when they come on the show. It's a big catch-all question. So what does it mean to you to be a Spider-Man artist?
Well, I think I could sum it up with something like with great power comes great responsibility. Well, I like to think of that. It's something unique. Like I read once something that Stan Lee wrote about, like being a Spider-Man artist is one of the toughest thing ever. And well, I try not to think too much about that, but about the fact that I'm blessed and happy and lucky to be able to do it. So, but yeah, I realized, because he's such an iconic character and everybody knows it all over the world, that it's really important to do a good job with it. So that's why it takes great responsibility to be a Spider-Man artist. But I mean, so far so good.
Well, definitely. Well, Giuseppe, thank you again so much for taking a few minutes out to talk to us.
Thank you, Mark. It's been a pleasure.
Spider-Man and his amazing friends.
Special thanks again to Giuseppe Camuncoli for coming on our show. It really meant a tremendous amount of us for you to come on, and we're glad to give you this interview. If you like Amazing Spider Talk, of course, you can rate and review our show either on iTunes or on Stitcher. Just search on Amazing Spider Talk or on Spider-Man. We'll come up pretty quickly. And when you're there, give us a rating, review us, leave us some feedback, good or bad. We'll read it on the air. We like it when it's good, though, of course. And then if you have any questions you want to ask